Hello, everyone. I'm Asha Nayaswami, and I'm back again with James Noh-Kuhn, and this is the second interview we've done with him. Yes, this says we're talking to millennials, and yes, he's not. But he is part of,
I used to be
you
in that
used to be.
age.
That's true. At that age, you were. Yeah, it gets a little confusing. But we're dealing what the millennials. Most of the next generation of leaders and at Ananda in Ananda globally is of the millennials, and then there's a few tweeners. So there, he and Vivian David, his wife, whom we spoke to, they're tweeners. In chronologically, in the context of Ananda, they're part of what I call the third generation, which is Swami, the founders, and then the third generation that's taking it where it's taking it. So, James, you and I went through a wonderful conversation about how you got into the path, how you found Master, how you found Ananda, and then we got up to the recession of 2009, when your wonderful business with your wife, that was the result of divine inspiration, folded up. And then what essentially happened, which you told me, I believe, after we were off air, was that you had to go back to the corporate world, but now you went back to the corporate world as a disciple. So what I want to ask you now is we asked him how I met Master, and now I am a disciple working in the world. And you had quite a saga there before you came full time to Ananda. So talk to me about that. What did you do when you realized that your partnership business with Vivian David wasn't going to work? What happened after that? Where were you when that happened also?
Well, our business had been up in Sonoma County. It was based in the city of Sebastopol. And we kept checking in as disciples in our meditations, with God and Guru. Is this what we're supposed to be doing? And every time it was, yes, keep doing this, even though financially it made no sense. And then one day, and I don't know, I didn't actually get a different answer in my meditations, but clearly circumstances in the universe completely shifted. And suddenly everything just went away, and it was clear it's time to leave.
I see.
And fortunately, we had one of Vivian David's brothers had a house in Oakland. And his ex-wife and his son and daughter were there. They were all leaving. He was going to move in. So he had this house, 3-bedroom house with no furnishings. We had a bunch of furnishings and no house.
I see.
So he said, come on down. So we moved to Oakland.
I see.
So at this point, I'm not working. I actually had not been working for a while. I had no income. Vivian David was still doing a tiny bit of coaching, but we literally couldn't even buy groceries. I mean, we were financially destitute. And my full-time job was looking for a job. And at one point, this got very interesting. At one point, I actually got a job offer. It wasn't a great job, but it was a job. And I actually felt, I can't say I went into meditation and said, Master, do I take this? But I got that there's a little difference between having that direct question asked and answered and an intuitive feeling. And I had the intuitive feeling, don't. So I didn't. I turned the job offer down. It did not make any sense, but I felt very strong about that. Very shortly after that, less than a month, I interviewed with an emerging coffee company. They were small. They had, I think, 5 stores at the time. A father and a son who ran a very good corner coffee shop, didn't know how to, and they wanted to grow it big. And so they ended up hiring me. I took that job, and I felt very clearly from Master at that point, from Yogananda, yes, take this job, work with them.
So what you're saying here now is that because you were a disciple, your job search had a different quality.
It absolutely, and this was the beginning for me of my practices at that point as a Kriyaban, were just go in deeper and find those things and take in particular, the sense of intuition. This is a very important part in this aspect of my life. I've always had intuition in business. I think in an American corporate business, intuition is used all the time. We call it different things. Gut feels, and this is, I feel strong. I mean, even the word feel, it's not an emotion. But traditionally, men in America don't have intuition. It's a gender specific thing. I disagree with that, but that was how I had learned it. So now I'm taking that intuition that I think I always had, and I'm filtering it with, this is the spiritual path. And
Mm-hmm.
I am being led through, this intuition is part of the voice of God and gurus.
Mm-hmm.
And so every decision I made in this job, including do I take the job, was with that filter.
Mm.
Sometimes I would ask it specifically in a meditation. Sometimes it was just paying attention to that gut feel, more
Mm-hmm.
so than what my head was telling me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it didn't necessarily mean I was choosing things differently, the outcome, but how I was choosing made all the difference. And that felt really important dharmically for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that went on for almost 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was very successful at it. What was very interesting, just kind of jumping to the end a little bit, is every day in meditation, I would ask, should I stay in this job?
Mm-hmm.
Now, why was I asking that question? Well, because it felt important. But every day the answer was yes. It was
Mm-hmm.
very clear to me. Stay in. Why? I never got an answer to that question of why. So I just had to interpret. So I kept going and going and going. Then there was a time when there was no answer.
I want to slow down.
Yeah.
Okay, you're in the middle of the story, but let me just think. Just hold it right there,
Okay,
bookmark and come
I
back to
can
it,
do that. I can do that.
because I want to come back. So when you started working again in the corporate world, did you resent being there? Were you disappointed to be back in the corporate world? I mean, this was slightly
Yeah,
different because
yeah.
before you were in a big company, now you're in a
In a small
smaller.
company, there certainly was no resentment. No. Did I want? I mean, there was a part of me that did want to be there, and there's a part of me that didn't.
Uh-huh.
We had this practice, this coaching practice, that was successful in so many ways, but financially it wasn't.
I see.
On the other hand, working for this company, I now had an income that was more stable, more
Right.
reliable. We could make plans. We could develop a budget. We could buy groceries. We could do those things that
Mhm.
it got to the point where having no money was getting in the way of things.
I see. Uh-huh.
And now we had some money. I mean, it's not like it was a high paying job. It was nothing even remotely close to what I had working for the big corporation,
Uh-huh.
but it was enough to live on
Uh-huh.
as we were sharing that house with my brother-in-law.
Um, so was that a happy time or a tense time?
Somewhere in between.
Did you have any sense of being, well, you did. You said everything just went away, so you really felt like Master was putting you where you had to be. He told you to, you felt him telling you not to and yes with two different jobs.
Yeah.
So when you
But
were actually, go ahead, pardon me.
I was going
Tell
to
me.
say it was also, though, we felt distant because we were in a geography, in a household that was not, I guess you say, I mean, we hadn't lived in a spiritual community at that point,
Hmm.
but it just didn't feel as spiritual as things could be.
Right.
And yeah, we had spent a lot of years regularly going up to the expanding light, but we couldn't afford to do that.
I
So
see.
we were physically distanced from our Guru Bhai brothers and sisters,
Hmm.
and that part was difficult. There
Right.
was a dryness, as it were, to the spiritual life as a
Right.
result of that.
Right. Well, so interesting. Everybody has to pay their dues somewhere or
Yeah,
another.
yeah,
So, so when you're working, when you're now working and you're having to do all the same kinds of things you've done before, how did you mentioned paying more attention to the gut feeling of things? Did you have any other ways of like how being a disciple made you different as
yeah,
a worker?
yeah. I definitely noticed I had less stress and I
Uh huh.
was more calm.
Mm-hmm.
And part of how I noticed because of how I felt, but also I had people telling me that.
Mm.
How are you so calm? Why are you so not carefree? Because I wasn't carefree, but being able to not be so stressed when something major was some big problem that there was no solution apparently.
Right. Uh huh.
And one of the things I did, it was very important for me, is I did not proselytize by any means, but if anybody asked, I was going to answer.
Right.
And so I was very upfront of, I'm a yogi.
Uh huh.
And they're like, oh, okay, so you do yoga, meaning the postures. Like, yes, but also the the breathing practices, the pranayama, and I would say, I'd use that term, pranayama, like, what's that?
Uh-huh.
So every time they would ask, I would keep answering, and I keep going there. I was not afraid to use the word God and guru.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I wasn't proselytizing. And that made a huge difference for me because I could be authentic in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can be authentic with
Mm-hmm.
who I am and what is so meaningful for me, then I can be more at ease with myself and more at ease with everything that is surrounding me.
That's very good. Did you make any converts? Did you interest anybody in just as a curiosity? Did you
Well,
accidentally convert anyone?
I didn't convert them in the sense that they are now a part of Ananda. No,
Right.
I
Uh-huh.
did teach Hong Sa.
Uh-huh.
I taught many of the pranayama practices,
Uh-huh.
measured count breathing, and so on and so forth. There was one woman who we became good friends. I still am in connection with her because one of the things I did is I tried to keep up a noon meditation as much as possible. Find a
Uh-huh.
conference room or go out to a park or whatever. And she had a meditation practice years ago, and
Uh-huh.
she had let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I taught her Hong Sa, and we tried to meditate together as much as possible. And she had an office that had a door and walls and the whole bit. And so we would just go in there, close the door, and do Hong Sa for 10 or 15 minutes.
So you basically were able to meditate in the middle of your workday.
Often, not always, but
That
yeah.
often. Okay, well, that's very interesting. So you were successful at that business?
I think so.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I was there for about 7 years. The company grew. It was 5 stores when I left. It was a coffee company or it was 5 stores when I started. When I left, it was about 40.
That's,
And
yeah.
and I was responsible for all of the manufacturing and distribution and all those sort of logistical things. And I had left it such that the company was set up for 200 stores.
Right.
And they're still going strong. So the guy who came in behind me and that organization, the rest of that department that was 3 people when I started, and it was probably close to 70 when I left.
Good Lord, that is a lot of growth. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's tremendous. So then now let's go to where you were. Every day you asked whether or not you should stay in that business because it was
Yeah.
important to you, yes?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It just felt important to keep asking that question. If for
Mhm.
no other reason, it helped me stay attuned.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I really felt that voice. It wasn't me, in the way that so many people on this path describe of it's a voice that is not of me that kept
Mhm.
saying yes. And then one day there was no voice. There was no answer.
Really
And
interesting.
and I mean that happened, but this happened for many weeks in a row. There was just no answer. And then around March 1st,
Uh-huh.
I guess this would have been 2017.
Uh-huh.
It was a Friday.
Uh-huh.
I asked the question and I got an answer. Should I stay here in this job? And the answer was no.
Really?
Like,
Wow, just like
whoa, what do I do now? And it's like, okay, I need to come back to this. So Saturday morning, should I stay in this job? No. Like, okay, it's 2 days in a row. I need to start thinking about this. Does this mean I should just quit? Does this mean there's something else? I didn't know. It happened to be a weekend that Jyotish and Devi were visiting here in Palo Alto.
Uh-huh.
Vivian David and I were living in the community at this point.
Okay.
And they had a program that Saturday, went to the program, Sunday morning at service, and I'm there early for the purification, and I'm meditating. I said, okay, I'm going to ask it now in the middle of the temple. And I got that same answer, but the difference was there was this overwhelming sense of joy.
Oh, interesting.
Literally, I mean, I can feel the tears coming again.
Huh. Huh.
I can't explain it.
Uh-huh.
But that was, for me, that was the stamp on it. Something is going to change. Go
Uh-huh.
with it. This
Uh-huh.
is ordained in that way.
Right.
And the problem was I didn't do anything about it. I
I see.
sat with it and I just sat. I didn't take any action.
Uh-huh.
And about 3 weeks later,
Uh-huh.
my boss, the CEO of the company, approached me. And now I was a department head, and my department, in my opinion, was the best run department. Many people
Uh-huh.
thought that. And he
Uh-huh.
said, James, this is no longer going to work. I'm going to make a change. You're out.
Good Lord.
I mean, those weren't his words, but basically that was the message. Now
Wow.
he was very gracious about it. He said, "I'm going to give you, this is going to be like a 6-month period. I just want to be upfront
Uh-huh.
because I don't want to be going on a search for your replacement and you hearing about it somehow. I want you to hear it from me."
Huh. Wow. Did he
Okay.
fire you for cause, or he just wanted to put
No,
somebody else? No.
no cause. That's the thing. There really was no good reason for it.
So what was happening was that God was warning you.
Preparing me in that sense, yeah.
Yeah,
Because here's the thing. I initially started reacting to what he said in that meeting, and then I realized why? I was already told, get out,
yeah.
just go with it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I stopped arguing.
Uh-huh.
It's like, okay,
Yeah.
and that made it very easy for me. I mean, my indignation was still there,
Uh-huh.
but I could keep it at bay,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and that absolutely felt like the right thing to do. And so there was a grace throughout all of those months that then
Uh-huh.
followed.
Huh. Fantastic. So you skipped over. How did you come to move into the community? I mean, you're living in Oakland
Yeah.
in a not so congenial environment. So why did you decide to move over here?
Well, it was, I'm so grateful for what Vivica Davy's brother was able to do for us. I mean, it truly was a miracle and a godsend. And somewhere after about 3 years or so, because I had this income that I had, we were able to go back to the expanding light. So we just went up on a personal retreat, and
Uh-huh.
it was just like, ah,
Yeah.
we had this literal breath of ease that we hadn't
Uh-huh.
had in a while. And I reminded her as we came back, said, Palo Alto's not that far away, because at
Uh-huh.
this point, the Santa Rosa group was no longer had a regular Sunday
I
service.
see.
The center had been closed. Just all the recession had really dwindled all of the offerings there. So, well, Palo Alto's only on Sunday mornings, only 45 minutes away. We could drive down and go to service there. It's like, okay, well, let's do that. We're driving down. It's like, they do have a community.
Uh-huh.
We could check it out. It's like, okay, let's do that. And it just so happened there were openings coming up, and all things happened fairly quickly after that.
Right.
Literally just a matter of like 2 or 3 months,
Mm-hmm. And then here you are.
and then here we are.
So by the time you were out of a job, you were already established in the community.
Yeah, at that point we had been here, I think 3 years or 3.5 years,
Right.
and so here's the other interesting thing. I'm still working, but I'm out of a job,
Right.
so I'm now out looking. So
Right.
I've got my resume updated. I'm sending it out, and the job market was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's often times when we will apply for a job, many of them we don't hear anything back, but I got nothing on every single job that I applied for. Sometimes they were referrals from friends. I heard nothing. There was no yes, there was nothing. It's like something is going on here.
Right.
And then somewhere in the middle there, Shanti and I were having conversations of, is there any possibility that Viveka Devi and I could afford for me to work on an Ananda salary and work for the Sangha? And so
Mm-hmm.
we had to spend a period of time of can we afford it? Is there a position? And so on and so forth. And in the end, there was.
Mm.
But it definitely felt destined, because nothing else was, there was this curtain over every other possibility. And
Mm.
so all those other possibilities weren't happening.
So since you have been working full time for Ananda, which is what, 3 years now or something like that?
Almost 3 years, yeah.
So talk to me about the difference between working full time
Mhm.
for your guru's
Yeah.
work versus having a good job in a congenial, positive environment doing something that is worth doing. I mean,
Yeah.
just sort of talk about the contrast, because of course the money is hugely different.
The money is hugely different. I mean, there's a lot of details, but I'll start with an image, something that I got fairly readily early on. You occasionally, I think you still do swim
Uh-huh.
as a form of exercise. I don't swim, but here was the image. When I was working in the corporate world, trying to be a good disciple, it was like training in the ocean, swimming in the ocean, battling waves, battling seaweed,
Uh-huh.
currents, wind, and so on and so forth. It's hard.
Uh-huh.
Now, suddenly, I'm working the Sangha and I'm swimming in a pool,
I see.
and it's
You're still
easy.
swimming.
still
You're,
swimming,
uh-huh.
but it's easy.
It's easy.
It's easy in the sense of the practice I was taking into the corporate world was how can I hold God in everything?
Right.
And when I'm surrounded by the people who are not on a spiritual path, it's very easy to forget. It's
Mhm.
very easy to not remember I'm here for God.
Right. Right.
Now working in the Sangha where everything and everybody is about God.
Right.
Every decision is what's the best spiritually, people being more important than things. You know, a P&L statement is a thing
Right.
at a for-profit corporation.
Right.
It's not that we don't pay attention to our finances,
Right.
but they're not the most important thing. People
Right.
are more important.
Right.
And it's those little subtle nuances of those values and those principles that just shifted everything. So that even if what I'm doing of ordering product or making a deposit into the bank or whatever it is, this is serving God directly.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it so much easier for me to see and experience God in all of those things.
Right. No, I have often felt, I mean, I've spent my entire adult life because I moved to Ananda at the age of 24 and I had no significant jobs. I worked, but I just had, you know, nothing jobs. Um, but the feeling of integration is what I really loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That if I go back to when we were talking the other day, I was talking about my life in the Bisco world.
Uh-huh.
There was here's the personal life, here's the corporate life, and then here's the whatever else there is.
Right.
And now working, and I tried to do this when I was working for that other company right before the coffee company.
Right.
Tried to integrate it as much as possible, but I still had to step into two different environments.
Right.
Now being all Ananda all the time, it's
Mm-hmm.
one environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that integration is, I don't have to put energy into integrating. It is
Right.
integrated.
That was the question I was going to ask. Did you find that you suddenly had more and better energy? I mean, I when I first moved to Ananda a long time ago, I realized how much energy I was spending protecting myself from environments that were not harmonious to my soul.
Mm.
And when I no longer had to protect myself and got used to the fact that I didn't, I felt this enormous I suddenly had access to energy that wasn't being wasted in other ways. I mean, is there any resonance with that? Would you say that was so? Or
I wouldn't say it manifested as access to more energy.
uh huh.
There, I would say that there was an ease
Mm-hmm.
that I did not have to sort of steel myself into protecting. Um, but because I went into that job, and this is now that smaller, the coffee company,
Mm-hmm.
I went into it specifically as a practice of be a good disciple
Uh huh.
amongst all of these people, even if they aren't disciples, that doesn't matter.
Right.
And 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 it's not that I certainly wasn't argumentative. I didn't feel like I had to put energy out to it. It felt important on my spiritual path that I had to claim that for me.
Right.
And it's not that I no longer claim that. I do. I still have to claim that so that I don't revert back. Because if I'm not getting closer to, if something's not helping me get closer to God, then it's not helping me, and I don't want that.
Uh
And so
huh.
it's important for me to keep putting out that energy, to keep getting closer and closer and closer, whatever that means, however it means. Just what I'm doing it for is just a little bit different, maybe.
Uh-huh. What would you say? Let me just try to think. Life before being a disciple, life being after a disciple. Like we're quite apart
Mm.
from where you were working and who you were working with. How would you define the before and after? Once before Master came into your life,
Yeah.
after he came into your life.
So much more fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
Security, the feeling of security is so much more accessible now as a disciple because my security is with God and gurus. It's not in something that's out there. It's all within me.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I was never a big worrier. I didn't worry a lot. I have the normal kinds of stresses about life, but whatever there was, they don't they don't worry me. I mean, in these times,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much uncertainty with this pandemic and all. It it's not that it doesn't affect me, but it doesn't worry me.
Mm.
And if I was not a disciple, if I was not on this path, I think I probably would be much more worried.
Mm-hmm.
I can look at my brothers and sisters, for example, because I still am in contact with them. We have a weekly Zoom call, and I can see them just that, you know, they're kind of dipping out, they up and down, dip in and out, um, and there's a steadiness of being on this path as a disciple
Mm-hmm.
that helps, and
Mm-hmm.
it allows for ultimately that fulfillment, and in
Mm-hmm.
that sense more joy. And it's different than just being happy, because there's the happy and the sad, but
Mm-hmm.
joy is more consistent,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that.
Well, I think that's just wonderful, James.
I think so too.
So I don't think we can end better than with that. So I think we'll just let the interview go right there. That's very
Okay.
good. Thank you very much. Just so people will know, because James and Viveka Devi are so tied to each other and their spiritual lives are so much together. On Friday of this week, which is the 5th time, I'll 2 interviews with James, 2 interviews with Viveka Devi, and then on Friday they'll come together and talk a little bit, just let them share a little bit about being partners in life and partners on the path and what that's about. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
God bless you.
Bless you too. Bye bye.
Goodbye.